27. It's been the practice of the church for thousands of years in hearing the reading of God's Word, that there is a feeling, a sense of awe and thanksgiving that God speaks to us and what God has spoken to us. It's even been the practice of some churches in some places that the reader who is reading the text will say, "The word of the Lord," and the people will say, "Thanks be to God." And that seems liturgical and formal, but there's a sense of thanksgiving that we have that God has spoken to us. A sense of excitement that the Word is coming alive before us. The Holy Spirit is not going to let this Word return void. He's going to deliver it to our hearts. We ought to already give thanks to God because He has already spoken, and now we have His Word. We can hear from Him and obey Him and follow Him and submit to Him. We stand out of reverence. God has spoken to us, and this is what He says. Psalm 27. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When evildoers assail me to eat up my flesh, my adversaries and foes, it is they who stumble and fall. Though an army encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war rise against me, yet I will be confident. One thing have I asked of the Lord, and that I will seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord, and to inquire in His temple. For He will hide me in His shelter. In the day of trouble He will conceal me under the cover of His tent. He will lift me high upon a rock. And now my head shall be lifted up above my enemies all around me, and I will offer in His tent sacrifices with shouts of joy. I will sing and make melody to the Lord. Hear, O Lord, when I cry aloud. Be gracious to me and answer me. You have said, "Seek my face," and my heart says to you, "Your face, Lord, do I seek. Hide not your face from me. Turn not your servant away in anger, O you who have been my help. Cast me not off, forsake me not, O God of my salvation. For my father and my mother have forsaken me, but the Lord will take me in. Teach me your way, O Lord, and lead me on a level path because of my enemies. Give me not up to the will of my adversaries, for false witnesses have risen against me, and they breathe out violence. I believe that I shall look upon the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait for the Lord. Be strong, and let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord. May God bless the reading of His Word. You may be seated. There's an unfamiliar love song that I almost played for you today by the great theologian David Bowie. The song is just called Days, just the word days. And the theme of the song is unique in that he doesn't sing about a wedding or sing about the meeting or falling in love. What he sings about in this song, Days, is the idea of I love you every day. I love you today and yesterday and tomorrow. I love you the same every day. What a unique theme. Now, we're all sort of prone to eventing, right? We have opening day is always a sellout for your favorite baseball team. Maybe even opening weekend is a sellout for your baseball team. But then there's a saying or a phrase that we use, that baseball fans use. It's called the dog days of summer. Then it settles into a routine that's not that exciting. I mean, each game isn't quite as exciting as the first game of the season, and the team settles in, and what you hope doesn't settle in is apathy or indifference. The burden on my heart today is that after the eventing of Resurrection Day, the great celebration, and man, we had a sweet Sunday last week, didn't we? Man, from the bacon to the benediction, it was awesome. I mean, we had an awesome day last week. I don't just want to have one day of celebration. I don't just want to have one day that feels like life. I want us to have a history and a tradition of weekly gathering and celebrating and rejoicing in the coming of Christ and the living of Christ, His resurrection. David doesn't say, Lord, for this moment of stress and trial that I'm going through, I want just a waterfall of emotion and praise to cause me for this one day to be able to praise you. The prayer of David's heart, the theme of this psalm is, I want to be with you every day. I want to be excited about you every day. I want to inquire about you every day. And I pray that that would become the burden of our hearts, the desire of our affections. Is Easter over? No. Is Resurrection Day over? No, it's not. He is still risen. And you can answer that He is still risen indeed. He is. Last week was not an anomaly. It ought not be an anomaly. It ought to be an everyday occurrence in the life of a believer. David sees something. He grasps something that I think will help us. He grasps that this is just the overarching idea that continual worship is the remedy to all of his fears. Continual worship is the remedy to all of his fears. I pray for us that continual worship, daily worship, would be the remedy to all of our struggles and heartache and fears and baggage and burdens that we take with us through this life. Now, the circumstances of this psalm are a little murky. We're not exactly sure which event David is walking through the fear of. There are some speculations and some ideas, and on Wednesday night we talked about one of them, and today we'll talk about another one of them. There are several different occasions in David's life where you could apply this psalm, but that's awesome. There are several different occasions where you can apply this psalm. Means that there are several different occasions in our lives where this joy-filled response to the goodness and power of God will help us. There's a lot of places this psalm will plug in as your help. This text will feed you through a lot of different scenarios and situations, and I'm thankful to God for that, because I have used it in my life this week, and I pray to continue to pick this up as an aid and a help as I walk after God. So David starts with some thoughts about God, really connect to what Chris and I were talking about just a few minutes ago. This is a very personal psalm. David is in trial, and there's some sort of a battle going on. There's an army that's encompassed around him. He's afraid for his life. He wants to hide. That we know. There are several situations in David's life where an army surrounds him and he wants to hide. Okay? So he is in difficult circumstances. He's in a great trial, and he feels like he is surrounded. And he feels like some people who shouldn't have abandoned him, maybe even like his father and mother, have abandoned him. He feels like he's being lied about. He feels like he's being oppressed. He's under a great deal of stress. But he starts with some personal reflections about God. This conversation that takes place, this ongoing communication between David and his God. His sense of possession and belonging, the sense of connection really flows through it. So we'll start with David's thoughts about God. He says that God is my three things. He says God is my light, my salvation, and my stronghold. And David didn't say God is a light, that he is salvation, and he can be a stronghold. That's not what David said. Very personally, almost experientially, because of what he had been through, David says, God is my light. It was a light dude. Now, Dave Krause and I have been working on Volkswagen motors in his barn for a few months now, just working on our different Volkswagens. And I have discovered something about Dave that maybe you all don't know about Dave, but I'd like to tell you something about Dave. How many of you want to learn something about Dave today? All right? Dave has a flashlight for any situation. He has the right brightness, the right size of flashlight for any circumstance or any situation that you might ever come into. If you find yourself on a dark road in the evening and your Volkswagen breaks down and you need a flashlight, I guarantee you, whatever time of day it is, wherever he is, Dave has a flashlight within arm's reach. Okay? What does light do? Light makes you able to see things. What does light do? Light makes you able to see things you didn't see when there wasn't light. That's why you needed the light in the first place. Light gives you a perspective on what's happening. If something's broken, light shows you what's broken. If it's not broken, light proves to you that it's not broken. Light tells you what's ahead of you on the road. Light tells you that it's clear and you can keep moving. Light gives you the perspective by which you interpret everything that you see, because you wouldn't see it if there wasn't light. David says, the Lord is my light, the filter through which I perceive what is happening around me comes from God. Says the man surrounded by an army. And we're going to see how the filter of this light that God gives him changes David's perspective on what it means and how it feels to be surrounded by an army. He begins afraid. I'm surrounded by an army, and it has brought fear. I'm surrounded by an army, and it has brought memories of past fears. I feel oppressed. I feel without. And it has made me afraid. But now, Lord, I'm singing to you, and I'm starting by saying, you are my light. I want to re-evaluate and reinterpret my circumstances, not by my own lights, but I want to re-examine my circumstances by the light that you have given. May God give us grace to do that, to re-evaluate our family, our sense of well-being, to re-evaluate our jobs, to re-evaluate our circumstances and our trials. May God give us the grace to evaluate where we are by the light that God has given. That by which I see things. You are that, God. Then he says, you are my salvation. You are the way that I am rescued from what I see. You don't only show me what's on the road ahead of me or show me what's broken. You fix it. You repair it. You rescue me. You are the one who shows me what is happening, and you are the one who rescues me from whatever might happen. Do you see how these truths about God, these glorious knowledges about God, rescued David from whatever this awful circumstance that he is in? It brings him hope. You are my light. You are my salvation. While the light has shown me what's ahead, and while I wait, and sometimes we must wait, that's the theme of this song, while I wait for your salvation from whatever the light has shown me, you are my stronghold. You are the place where I am safe from what you have given me light to see and what you have not yet rescued me from. You are my stronghold. David finds hope and confidence and rescue and a reappraisal of his circumstances. He finds all of that in truths about God and experiences with God that have led him to this place of great confidence. God is David's champion. See this in verse 2. When evildoers assail me to eat up my flesh. When evildoers assail me. This sounds like the voice of someone who has had evildoers assail him before. And there's an instance, I want to use this. We're not sure this is the circumstance that David's talking about. Spurgeon thinks that this is the circumstance that David's talking about. It's the circumstance with Doeg the Edomite. How many of you have ever heard of Doeg the Edomite? You know the Bible story of Doeg the Edomite. He was a chief herdsman in Saul's cabinet, I guess you could say. But he was also Jewish rabbinical tradition tells us that Doeg was sort of known as a massive intellectual of his day. He was a wise, a knowledgeable researcher for his day. Doeg the Edomite happened to be present when David, while he was running from Saul, comes upon Ahimelech, the high priest. And he lies to Ahimelech and he says, Saul has sent me on a mission. Me and these men are on a mission. We're trying to do a mission for Israel's protection, and we're in obedience to the king right now, but we're starving, we're hungry, and we're tired. Could you give us a place to rest for a while? And Ahimelech and his follower priests that are with him in the area give David the showbread, and ultimately they give David the sword of Goliath. And they say, from this city of Nob, where David has come to rest, they say, you just rest here and eat this food. So David and his men, who are running from Saul at the time, are replenished and renewed, and then they go along their way. And Saul asks, has anyone seen David? And this Doeg the Edomite happened to be in the area where Ahimelech had fed David, and he knew that David had been there. And he rats him out. Have you ever been ratted out? You ever had maybe someone you thought was a friend tell on you? There's no betrayal like that, is there? David had experienced that several times. He even writes songs about it. Not necessarily in this circumstance, but in other circumstances of betrayal. David writes, you were my beloved and familiar friend. You know what it feels like to be stabbed in the back and betrayed? It hurts. I'd almost rather be surrounded by an army than feel that pain. Man, it's just about the worst thing there is. This is what's happening to David. He's been betrayed. But not only is he betrayed, Doeg the Edomite reports that Ahimelech helped David. Now, Ahimelech was innocent. He just helped David because he believed David was doing a mission for Saul. But Saul hears that Ahimelech helped him, and so he orders the death of Ahimelech and the death of the priest with Ahimelech. But none of the military officers that are with Saul at the time are willing to raise their hands up against the priests. So Doeg the Edomite, the tattletale, trying to curry favor with Saul, says, I'll do it. Not only will I rat David out, I will perform the executions that Saul had commanded. So Doeg kills Ahimelech, kills the priest with Ahimelech, and just for good measure, kills their families as well. So now, David has been betrayed, but David's friends have been betrayed also. Can you imagine the weight of guilt that rested on David's conscience for stopping in that area? Later on in Psalms 51 and 52, Psalm 52, David writes about his emotions and just the pain and the burden of guilt that came with just his culpability for the murder of Ahimelech and all of those people. Can you just imagine the oppression that sits on David? There's an army surrounding him. But have you ever felt what it's like to have an army inside of you attacking you? Just the burden and oppression of guilt for the screw-ups that you've done. Yeah, you've been betrayed, but you messed up yourself too. Just this great weight is sitting on David. But he knows this. He knows this about God, and he gives it hope. When evildoers assail me to eat up my flesh. Does anything eat up your flesh like guilt? When they just want to do away with me, he says, my adversaries and foes, it is they who stumble and fall. You are my champion. You rescue me from the thing that eats me up inside and the thing that opposes me outside. You're my champion from all of these things, he says. He says, my adversaries and foes. Both of those words are plural. David doesn't just have one enemy that he's fought. He's not just talking about the victory over Goliath. There has been an ongoing pattern of struggle. There's been an ongoing pattern of opposition in his life. Yet God has rescued him and delivered them from them all. And those deliveries that God has given to David, those blessings of mercy and grace, have produced in David a confidence, a hope, an assurance, a steadiness of worship that is admirable and is something that we should really look into here. He sees this about God, and it helps him. But David isn't just remembering the past. He's not just remembering this guilt inside of him. Something is going on right now. You see it in the text? Verse 3, though an army encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. When do you say, I'm not afraid of that? Why is David even talking about fear? I'm not afraid of you. That comes up when our hearts are filled with fear. That comes up when we're really struggling and having a battle against fear. David is writing, he's preaching to his own heart. I'm oppressed, I'm opposed, I'm all these things weighing against me right now, but I will not fear, because my champion has helped me. Though an army encamps against me, he is my light. This calls to remembrance texts of Scripture that have helped us. Remember when Elisha prays that his friend would see the army of angels that surround the army of the Assyrian. David says, lift up my head. Help me to see beyond the army that surrounds me. God surrounds what surrounds me. Help me to see and have hope. Be the light that helps me reevaluate and re-examine my circumstances. Something is going on right now, but he is my light. He will be my salvation, and in the meantime, he is my stronghold. That pretty much sees us through whatever we might struggle with. Brothers and sisters, that is our hope. He is our light. He is that by which we see what is happening around us. He will be our salvation. He has promised to come and rescue and redeem us, and that we will dwell with him forever. He will be our salvation, and in the meantime, he is our stronghold. May that be our answer to whatever it is that we're in. May that be our hope. This psalm helps us. So what are these thoughts about God, that he's the light, he's the salvation, he's the stronghold, what did these thoughts about God produce in David? Well, they produce in David something they need to produce in us. They produce single-mindedness. One thing have I asked. Because you're the light that I see everything by, because you're my salvation, because you're my stronghold, Lord, you've really narrowed my focus. Now, could we really say about David that he is a one-thing wanter? Is David, in the life and the history you know of David, is that he only wants one thing? Is that what we know about David? David had problems with wanting things, right? He wanted the credit for building the temple. He wanted a great kingdom, and so he wanted to number his people. He wanted wealth and riches. He wanted a woman that didn't belong to him. David wanted many things, but see this. See that this help of God, this knowledge of God, began to shape in David a different wanting. Began to shape it, realizing that God was his salvation, realizing that God was his rescue, seeing things through the light of God and his glory and his grace given to David. Seeing those things began to shift David's wants off of all of the other things that he wanted and cause him to want one thing instead. One thing have I asked of the Lord. Now as I am surrounded by an army, now as I am weighed down perhaps by guilt from what happened to Ahimelech, wherever I am, Lord, I feel all of this oppression, yet this one thing helps me and is my rescue. One thing have I asked. But I'm not just asking for things. Maybe you've had a moment where you've wanted this one thing from God, and you prayed about it. Lord, I pray that I would want more of you. Lord, I pray that I would not want the other things that I want that I shouldn't want. Lord, help me to want what you want me to want. Pray that prayer? David goes further. One thing have I asked, and that I will seek. You see this? David puts action to his wanting. I've asked you for more of you, and the way I get more of you is seeking after you. maintain this standard of intentional ignorance. I don't want nothing to be expected of me, because after all I am is a continual milk drinker. I want to move from milk to meat. I want to grow into you. I want to know you more. I want to know you more deeply. I want to understand the gospel more and more fully. I want to taste the sweetness of Christ, even if it means fellowship with his sufferings. I want to know more of you. I want that because that's where my hope is. That's how I understand more fully that you are my stronghold. That's how I understand more fully that you are my salvation. That's how the light gets brighter and brighter, because I know you more. I know your purpose more. I know how you've revealed yourself more. I'm not just asking for this. I'm seeking it. I'm pursuing it. I'm reading about it. I'm studying about it. And I'm present to hear about it. Why is this one thing what David seeks after? Verse 5. He will hide me in his shelter in the day of trouble. I want it because that's where safety is. I pursue it passionately because that's what's safe. That's how I flee from my desires. That's how I flee from my circumstances. That's how I use the light that I've been given to re-understand the circumstances and situation my life has fallen into. I re-understand everything when I flee towards the one who is my help in trouble. What is this thing that he's asking about and pursuing? He says that I can dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life. The king who is a warrior, the king who lives in a palace, the king who united the nation, the king who built cities and occupied them, the king who had an ever-increasing strong army, the king who fought victoriously in many battles, that king said, you know what I wish I could do more of? Not military acquisition, not palace building. What I want to get more of what I need, I wish I could be like the priests and just dwell in the house of God every day. I don't think this is just spiritualizing. I think David is in a moment of trial. He is surrounded. And he said, you know what I wish I had more of now in this moment of trial? I wish I had had more days that I could just go into the house of the Lord and taste and see that the Lord is good. I wish I had more days that I could go inquire of him and learn of him and learn about his faithfulness. I wish there had been more opportunities to worship and hear his word. I want that. I want more of that. I don't want just an Easter existence. I don't want just a Resurrection Day isolated celebration. What I want more of is to taste and know the goodness of the Lord daily, every day, all the time. I'm hungry for that, for more and more and more and more of it. He will hide me in his shelter on the day of trouble. He said this. He said, I will be hidden in his tent and lifted up on a rock. Well, which is it, David? Are you hidden in his tent or are you lifted up on a rock? He says, when he hides me, when he rescues me in the day of trouble, he brings me the appropriate rescue for the situation. Sometimes what God has for you is a place to hide. And somehow what God has for you sometimes is that when your trials are oppressive and things are overwhelming, he gives you a place to just go and hide and be away from it. He encompasses you in his wings. He embraces you. He holds you and he cares for you. Sometimes that's what you need. And then there's other times. He doesn't hide you. He lifts you up. He doesn't take you out of your circumstances. He just lifts you up above your circumstances and says, I have a purpose in this. I will rescue you in the end from this. You must endure this, but I want you to look up and see past the army to the greater army that is behind. He either hides us or he lifts us up. He will help us in the day of trouble. He is our shelter. He doesn't just ask to give periodic attendance to the house of the Lord. He says, I want to dwell to be in God's presence all the time. I want to dwell in the house of the Lord. Not twice a year, once a month, whether I do it or not. He says, I want this all the days of my life. I want this to be the continual prayer of my heart. Then we see this. What is the fruit? What he knows about God gives him hope, it gives him rescue, and it produces a rescued man who is a worshiper. See this. Look at verse 6. And now my head shall be lifted up above my enemies all around me. And I will offer in his tent sacrifices with shouts of joy. I will sing and make melody to the Lord. David sees the light. His head is lifted up. Though surrounded by enemies, he says, I'm not focused on them. Rather, my eyes are fixed on you. I will sacrifice. I will shout with joy. I will sing and make melody to the Lord. Then two things happen. This is really a beautiful thing. First, David prays. He says, Hear, O Lord. He cries out to God from his situation of trouble. He's not just making sounds for the approval of men. David wants to actually talk with God, and there's a difference in prayer. Spurgeon said this, Pharisees care not a fig for the Lord's hearing them, so long as they are heard by men. That's not the kind of prayer David is offering here. David is not crying out to God so that people hear him and say, look at David. When he's in trouble, he cries out to God. David is quite a guy. David cries out to God, and he doesn't care if other men hear him or not. He cries out to God and says, God, rescue me. God, help me. He's pleading with God because he wants to hear from God. He's asking God to hear him. But then he says this. Look at verse 7 and 8. Hear, O Lord, when I cry aloud. Be gracious to me and answer me. You have said, seek my face. My heart says to you, your face, Lord, do I seek. Ha. Maybe this is what is missing in us seeing in light. David cries out to God, Hear, O Lord, and then he says, You have said. David isn't asking God just to listen to him. David is listening to what God has said. You're my help. You're my light. You're my salvation. You're my stronghold. Hear me when I cry to you. And I'm not just asking you to hear me. While I'm asking for that, I'm listening to you. And you have said, seek my face. And the answer to David's trial has all been found in the face seeking. Because David has sought the face of God. He knows what he needs to know to have this confidence. He knows that God will lift him up. He knows that God will hide him. He knows that God is his salvation. He knows that God is his light. He knows that God is his stronghold. He remembers the faithfulness of God in the past. He knows all of these things because he sought after the face of God. He's listened to what God has said. And so, when the trial comes, because David has already listened to what God has said, he knows where to put it. He knows how to respond. He knows how to deal with it. Our struggle and our trial often comes because the trial comes and we're unprepared. The trial comes, and then in the trial, then we look to God and say, now one thing I ask. David has already begun to wrestle for one thing before the trial comes. Because he sought after the face of God as the trial comes, his heart is prepared to respond in hope and confidence. Don't wait for God to introduce struggle and trial and circumstances into your life to make God the one thing that you fix your eyes on. Fix your eyes on him alone, and then as the trials come, you will see them by a different light than everybody else sees them. You will not be overwhelmed. You will not be cast aside. You will not be tossed around like the wind. Those things won't happen to you because of what you know about God and seeking his face. David says, Hear, O Lord, but he also says, I hear you, O Lord. He's not just telling God what to do. He doesn't say, God, give me a way to get what I want. He says in verse 11, teach me your way, O Lord. I'm in this circumstance. I'm in this trial. I'm seeking after your face. You are hiding me. Teach me your way. Is that how you pray and talk to God? Is that what you want from God? Do you want to dictate to God the way that he should do things? Or do you want God to dictate to you what he is doing and help you understand and teach you his way? This is who I am. I'm not necessarily going to take you out of the circumstance that I gave you in the first place. I'm not going to remove you from this thing that I've allowed in your life for judgment. I'm not going to remove you from the thing that I've put in your life for discipline, for training in righteousness. I'm not going to take away from you what I gave to you. But I will hide you when you need hidden. I will lift you up when you need lifted up. I will ultimately be your salvation. In the meantime, I am your stronghold. Look at the light that I have given you to understand what's really happening. What great hope and rescue that is. Teach me your way. You have been my help. And then David offers these words that this has really been my prayer in my heart this week. David says this, lead me on a level path. You see that in verse 11? Teach me your way, O Lord, and lead me on a level path because of my enemies. Because there are so many things that oppose me. Because there are so many things that oppress me. Because I have guilt inside and armies outside. Because friends have betrayed me, and even sometimes people are lying about me, David says. Because of all of this different oppression, because of my enemies, some of them self-inflicted, some of them internal, some of them external. Teach me your way. Teach me who you are, and teach me what you've done. Lead me on a level path. Sometimes life feels like a roller coaster, doesn't it? Sometimes the lows are pretty low and the highs are pretty high. So we have these Christian mountaintop experiences like last Sunday could be. Certain worship services. We have this time where emotionally we're just invested, and it's good to have that. We have just this season, this high, this perhaps manufactured sense of worship. Everything's great. And then we have these other seasons where it seems like God is a million miles away and our hearts are cold and dead and disinterested and diffident and apathetic, and we're just not in it. We have both these. David prays as a result of dwelling daily in your house, as a result of daily inquiring about your goodness, as a result of remembering your faithfulness in the past, as a result of remembering that you are my light, my salvation, and my stronghold. Use all of that to produce in me someone who is level. That's hard for me. If you know me at all, that's just against my genetic makeup. I'm the word I've always heard used is mercurial. You know, like the mercury goes up and down. You know, if it's cloudy for 2 or 3 days, it messes with my mood. The ups are up and the downs are downs. This psalm calls for something and offers something to the believer. A level life. A sense of confidence. Yeah, I see the opposition. I'm not indifferent or unaware of the opposition that's around. I'm not blind to those realities. But I know this. He's my stronghold, and he's my salvation. I know that he's my hope. He's the one who will rescue me. He'll hide me when I need hidden, and he'll lift me up when I need lifted up. I know those things about God. And because I know those things about God, I can be steady. I can be level. I can trust him. Some of you are really good at that. Some of you are marked by that level faithfulness. I admire that. That's a great example to believers. And this is the invitation and the challenge for us. And not just to have a level demeanor in our circumstances, but to be level in our desire for worship. To not be mercurial in our passion for Christ and our desire to inquire him. To not be mercurial in our attraction to the people of God, and certainly to the house of God when we gather to worship. But to be level there as well, to continually long to celebrate the resurrection, to continually long to see Christ work in our lives, to continually long to inquire of him, that we may know him, so that we can know the rescue and the stronghold that we have, and be sure of and confident in the salvation that he has given us, that we want that not just once for a moment, but that we want it continually. That that's a burden on our hearts continually, that we continue to walk in this. Lead me in a level path. What is life like in the level path? Hear David as he closes the psalm. As God steadies him and gives him this level confidence, this continual desire to be in God's presence, he says, I believe that I shall look upon the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Ha! He's not talking Ephesians like here. He's not talking about the eternal inheritance reserved in heaven for him because he hopes in the promise of Christ. That's not what he's talking about. David says, because I've inquired of the Lord, because I have seen his faithfulness in the past, because I am sure that he is my light, my salvation, and my stronghold, because I know those things about God, I believe that it's not going to have to wait till I die before I'm filled with hope. I'm going to see fruition of God's promises, fruit of faithfulness. I think I'll see it while I'm still alive. Some of you have worked in ministry, taught a Sunday school class, served in a capacity in our body. You work for a long time and it seems like there's just no fruit to it. Is it worth it? David says this. Guilt inside, surrounded outside, these truths about God, in a season of defeat, while Saul is still chasing him, perhaps while he's hiding in a cave, David says this. I believe that I will see this work of God in my lifetime. I believe God's going to be faithful to his promise. You might put it this way. Be not weary in well-doing, for in due time you will reap. You work hard and don't give up. Satan wants you to give up. Satan wants to show you all of the oppression and all of the enemy and all the baggage and all of the seeming fruitlessness. That's what Satan wants you to see. The promise of God is that he is our light, he is our salvation, he is our stronghold. So what is the natural conclusion? Where are you? Where's your heart? Where are your affections? Inquire of the Lord. Cry out to God. Hear me, O God. Remember what God has said. And wait for the Lord. Wait for the Lord. I'm not asking you to do anything that I'm not having to do myself. Wait for the Lord. Wait for the Lord to penetrate the impenetrable. To deliver truth to the heart that is hard and stubborn and disinterested. Wait for the Lord to bring fruit where you have labored and preached and shared the gospel faithfully. Wait for the Lord. Wait for the Lord to bring to life the dead. Wait for the Lord to stir the souls of the sleeping. Wait for the Lord to bring repentance. Wait for the Lord to reveal himself as your salvation. Wait for the Lord to be your stronghold. Wait for the Lord. Look at the light that he has given you. See things through his perspective, not from the light that you have apart from him. Wait. Does David pretend that it's easy to wait? How many of you just love waiting? I'm a terrible waiter. I'm laboring. Laura and I are specifically praying that God help me with patience. I'm not asking God to give me patience because then he's going to just make things more difficult, but that he'd help me with patience with what I already have. Listen to this. David understands this is not easy. Be strong. Hang on. This is not easy. Be strong. You got to be strong. It's almost like a dad there. Come on, man. Man up. Be strong. Let your heart take courage. How can my heart take courage? That's the whole point. My heart doesn't have courage. Let your heart take courage. David says, you have been my help. You are my stronghold. You will be my salvation. You are my light. Take courage in what you've discovered about God by inquiring in his house. Take what you have learned. May it give you courage to wait for the Lord. And believe. While you're waiting, while I'm waiting, believe that you will look on the goodness of the Lord while you live to see.